Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
Hello there. Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm Kristen Johnson.
And it is Serious Saturday.
Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday. But if you're listening to this on a different day, don't be offended. You know, it was Saturday and this really happened. You experienced this. It happened. It's a reality.
It is.
It's just a reality for another day, I suppose. So our reality has been a little twisted lately. We've been having a CME storm this week, and I think it wraps up today, but it started a few days ago. And these are coronal mass ejections, which are something, basically giant solar flares. It's something to take kind of seriously. They can affect our power grid, and you may or may not know that North and South America have been under a blackout warning for a few days, where the power grid could be that affected. No joke. This is real stuff. And I'm going to share a tab here. Let me see here. This is SolarHam from solarham.com. And you guys can check this out on your own. But it's a pretty cool website that kind of compiles some of the things that Kristen and I watch. And Kristen, you are the one that actually introduced me to this stuff.
I did. Yes.
It's not that, this stuff doesn't happen. And I don't want to, panic people.
No, but sometimes it's
right here. This is, just 2 days ago. This is where a solar flare actually reached the X level and crossed the line. And you see it goes down, it goes up, and it's been building. And the prediction is that, there's been quite a bit of activity through this week that could put us in there. You see C flare, which is not as much of a problem at 99%, M flare at 70%, X flare at 25%, which is very high.
Mm-hmm.
That is not normal for us. And if we go over here, again, thanks to solarham.com, you can actually see the flares like taking off. See that? That is a flare heading toward Earth. Now sometimes these
two
things,
of them.
Right. And sometimes these things go off the back of the sun and it's not really a problem. But when they come to, our planet here, and you can see the planets, that is an issue. I guess they call that, is that a stereo view, Kristen?
Yes.
All right, here's stereo ahead. Look at that. Here's the one that shows the motion. And see, they block out the actual sun because, it's too much for the camera. But you can see these like solar winds and waves. There's CMEs in there. There's a big one. The other day, see, look at that coming across. There was one that was just absolutely enormous.
Yeah, it wasn't sun facing. Is that the one you're talking about? I mean, earth facing.
It was earth facing.
Yeah.
And it was like something out of a science fiction movie. I mean, this is just, it's bananas. But this is our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really happening. And here's a picture. And you can see these hot spots. These are where the flares or CMEs, coronal mass ejections, come from. And we've talked about them on the show before.
I am very up to
Dr.
date with these things. I see them
Michael
every
Lynch
day.
was on. We were talking about them. He follows them pretty closely. And so that's a real thing. And I just want to make you aware of that because I think that's it's a little scary. You don't see a lot of press about it. But once you start to watch it, what is going on? What other effects might that have besides?
Exactly. We're not fear mongering or anything, but I'm very into vibrations and everything. And you wonder how these things affect not just electronics, but us in general.
Electronics can be highly affected. So if you've had trouble with your electronics this week, that may be why.
Yes.
This has happened to the Earth before in the 1800s, and I forget what year off the top of my head. Back when we had the telegraph system, it went down completely. This is before phones.
It melted the telegrams.
That kind of thing.
It melted the telegraph. I mean, that was
it melted all the machinery.
So I'm like, wow.
And they couldn't send telegraphs. They had to rebuild all the machinery. I believe somewhere in, I think it was late 80s, early 90s, this affected Canada in such a way. There was a large portion of Canada that did lose its power grid. It does happen. It is a serious thing. But we've got a fantastic show for you.
Say highs.
Oh, the highs and the lows, the highs and the wows.
Thank you, Courtney Peterson.
Yeah, let's see. We actually had a
Sharing.
comment before we even got started,
We
which I think is the first time that has happened.
Oh, Mike's.
So, people are excited about our guest. I'll put that up here. Steffi Black Coaching, Life and Career Coach says, love to hear from Robin Armstrong, who is our guest today. I'm going to tell you about him in a moment. He's an excellent astrology teacher and more. And yeah, he is. We are honored to have him on. Ken from the Wizard's Table.
I know I was singing that. I was typing it.
Ken Allen,
Ken
the Wizard's Table.
Allen.
Hello, my beloved friends. Hello, our beloved friend. I hope you're doing well. Hello from the Wizard's Table. Anne-Marie Young says, cool. You like that CME stuff, Anne-Marie? We watch that all the time.
Yeah, I'm up to
Courtney
date.
Peterson says, hey, thanks for joining. I'm glad to see you out there. Kaz Clark, the Pentrick Incident.
Pentrick.
If you don't know Kaz, I totally recommend you guys start looking into this. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Every day.
What was supposed to be, or what is being called a military exercise in Pentrick in the UK, was not. And she
It
can tell you
was
about
so
that.
bad that her family was actually threatened.
Excellent stuff. And if you look in our archives, we have an interview with Kaz.
Nice military
We
exercise.
should actually have her back on.
Yes.
Mike Bloomfield says, share to American Ghost Stories. Thank you, Mike. We really appreciate that. All right. And wow, on the CMEs. Yeah, the coronal mass ejections, which sounds like some kind of porn, is actually a pretty serious thing.
To you.
Of course, everything sounds like porn to me. But
Yeah. It does.
whatever. I'm a dude. It happens. Well, let's get into our guest. Poor Kristen. Oh, you just got to deal with it.
Me?
His name is Robin Armstrong. And to quote him, he says, astrology is a wonderful language, and I have always been aspiring to improve upon my astrological literacy in as many ways or dimensions as possible. Robin Armstrong is a professional astrologer, author, international speaker, and is well known for radio and television shows across the USA and Canada. He has a CAA diploma, and is president of the RASA, R-A-S-A, School of Astrology. Robin has deep roots in both China and India, and he has designed and built the Celestial Harp, which is what our background is. If you guys can make that out, we'll try to bring up another picture of it. This is a 72-stringed musical instrument to play a person's horoscope in the I Ching. And has built a forest Woodhenge, which we'll also talk about, a super sundial of 126 posts arranged according to astrology and the I Ching. And he is the author of many books. And this guy has an amazing body of work. So let's bring him right on. Good afternoon, Robin. How are you?
Hi. Good to be here.
It's great to have you.
Great to have
we
you.
really appreciate you coming on our show, our humble show. You have an amazing body of work, my friend. And I wanted to talk to you. I guess I know you've been doing this. You have a lifetime of work here. And I guess maybe we'll start with meditation, if that's all right with you. Because
Whatever, sure.
In our banner, not our banner, but when I advertise a show, Meditation Squared, because I know a little bit about from watching you on our good friend Robert Lindsay Milne's podcast, The Other Side of the Crystal Ball, that you are a serious meditator and have been for a very long time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
On a simple level, I chant a lot, and my chanting is part of my meditation. So the idea is if you say a name of God, God's there. If you say it twice, God's there twice. Of course, God's always there anyways, but it's just a thing. It's a tool to get your concentration. So I chant 2 or 3 hours every morning before I start the day. So this is, I've been doing that for 50 years.
That's a lot of chanting. Now,
It's accumulative. Like if you think of meditation practically, it's a cultivation of the experience of silence. Okay, now to cultivate the experience of silence, they got several problems. Like how do you stop your mind? How do you stop thinking to be able to get silent? I mean, before you can learn anything spiritually, you have to unlearn everything you think you know.
True.
So how to unlearn the things you think you know and just be okay for who you are.
Now,
Without thoughts or relevance. It's a texture that we grow through. So we come from our egos, our bodies. This is our life. This is what we're doing. We're doing what we can. And we go along, and suddenly that crashes. We get heartbroken, or something happens. All of a sudden, why? How could this possibly? How could God let this happen? How could this possibly be? We start asking the questions. We start going in deeper. Or you can just say, how could you do this to me? Like whatever. But it's usually our projection coming back at us. And how do you stop the projections? Even in today's world, like there's so much darkness and people have been searching for truth for thousands of years and never found it on the media. Like it's just it's not been in newspaper. You don't go there to find truth. So in the world we have so much untruth and wrong information and fear and darkness. But how do you get that out of your head and just get light and simplicity and sort of simple innocence just to make your life better? And if everybody did that, the world would change.
It's very true. We talk about that a lot.
The trouble, you got to the meditation about half on to talking about the war, but really wars have always been going on. Mm-hmm. Hate and violence, and they set up knots of hate that go on for hundreds of years. This is a really sad thing.
It is.
And anybody who kills somebody is taking on at least 2 or 3 more lifetimes for each person they kill. Because they have to come back as a mother and lose a child, as a father and lose a child, as a sister and lose a child, until they get the experience of the results of what they've done. So some people are setting up things where they're going to be here. They got hundreds more lifetimes. And that, like, you could say, okay, that's a reward, but it's not on the spiritual path when you're trying to get beyond things. So even in the midst of all the big wars, there's always saints and spiritual lights and inner lights going on at the same time. So like in the middle of the darkness, there's still lights burning, and one little candle can have a huge effect.
Right. Now, when you mention unlearning things, that reminds me of Plato's allegory with the cave, where the 3 people are held. I believe it's 3. Held prisoner in a cave, and he wrote about this, but like a conversation, I think, between Socrates and his brother, where they're in the cave, and all they know, like their whole life, they're chained together, is the fire that's burning in front of them, and they know nothing about the outside world. They start to believe that the shadows are real, and their environment tells them that this is all real. And like one of them escapes or something, and I'm sorry, I don't know the allegory by heart, but it made me think of this, and it leads into something about you. One of them escapes and comes back and says, hey, there's a big world out here, and tries to free them, and they actually want to kill this guy because they're so stuck in that reality of the cave. People need to unlearn what's going on. Now, as I understand it, you yourself spent a great deal of time in a cave when you were younger. Is that right?
Yeah, when I was a young man. No, it's like in the late 60s. So it was like, the early 60s, I was like a hippie. My family split up. I'm out traveling. I'm hanging around and traveling to San Francisco, Mexico, New York, back and forth in these places. And then all of a sudden, at some point, I realized it was like I identified to it so much. Wow, this is so free. This is so liberal. And then at some point it became, this isn't a good thing. People were dying, things were going wrong, and all of a sudden, this isn't a good thing. And that shook me tremendously. I didn't know who I was anymore, and that set me on my spiritual path. So I ended up going, I don't belong here, I don't belong here. I went around the world till I ended up in India, and I ran across these, they're like caves, but they're really a room that's cultivated, has a toilet in it and a sink in it. So you can be alone with some facilities. You don't have to deal with all the bugs and all the things. But the idea was, the thoughts that come into your mind when you're alone, that's your karma. How do you change that? How do you change the thoughts that come into your mind when you're alone? Well, okay, so like you go be alone and you find out, you put in the time. And for me, the chanting was getting rid of a lot of the old thoughts, just buzzing them out. When you're a kid, you don't want to hear something and go, yeah. So you don't hear, the chanting is doing that to the world so you can hear something deeper. Or be listening to something deeper. So it's just, in today's world, there's so much mental exercise. Everybody's such in a mental environment, the media and everything else, that it's really hard to get detached from the mental relevance. To slow it down, to calm it down, to even pause it. Because it means this, this means this. We suddenly get caught in it. So slowing that down is part of and stopping that is part of the process of meditation to get to just simple innocence. It was back in the 60s, it was like psychedelic times. People would take something and they open up, they get the sensory overload. They go, oh, wow, this is sensitive. Wow, wow. Oh, this is sensitive. Wow. Oh, wow. Until they overload, they go, oh, wow, this must be God. Okay, they see that sensory overload and they get the sense of God. But really, everything's God. But really, it starts before you even think. It's before you even go into the sensory section. It's before that. And it's just, God's simply sitting there.
Right.
That's like,
mind expansion, right? So you
I'm sorry.
different perspectives. With the psychedelics, you see reality from a few different perspectives, and it is enlightening. But of course, there can be too much of anything, right?
Well, the difference is in the sensory overload. This must be God. You begin to think consciousness is God. This is consciousness. This is God. This is everything. And there's a whole streams of religions, of philosophies, of ideologies built up in today's world that have built up on this. Consciousness is it. But consciousness fluctuates and changes. That's not God. It's a veil. And there's still a subtler thing behind that, where it's just silence, no words, no thoughts, just simple innocence, unexplainable. And it's how do we restore innocence? How do we get back to our simplicity? We're allowed to do whatever we want. You want something, you go get it. You desire something to do, but we get the repercussions of the thoughts we go out and the actions that come from that. So like, right now in the world, there's a mass hysteria. Like everybody's got these visions and everybody's so sure their vision is real and it's all based on confusing facts and it's all disturbed, but they're ready to judge everyone else as being wrong because they don't have the same vision, and there's wars being fought and there's no common sense or way of, there's no discrimination how to get rid of this.
Right.
And this craziness is going on for about another month before we start to see how it settles.
Let's talk about that cave a little bit. Now, you spent that 15 months in the cave, and you were without clothes. You were naked in the cave. Yep. People brought you food. You saw
there was a double door. There was a double door. Food was put in like this, and I'd take it, but I didn't see anybody.
Okay. And they would simply, who did this? Like, who dropped off the food?
It's a small It's a small group that followed a certain saint in Gujarat, and his name is Mota Maharaj. He's not well known because this is a very antisocial, quiet thing. But
I'm picturing India in the 1960s.
He was tied up with Gandhi and working with the Untouchables and stuff like this, and this spun off out of that. But he built these rooms to be alone, where you can just be alone and meditate and people go in for a week at a time or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Not many people. I went in and I ended up spending 13 months in there. So like, that's not done. Nobody's done that. So that just happens, but normally people go in for a week, mostly to be alone, to just cultivate that voice of silence and get rid of it once it touches. Now, it's probably 80% women that use this more than men for meditating.
Wow.
But you think about it, you got a chance to be alone for a week, just chant, be alone, no phone call, no husband, no kids screaming at you, nothing jumping in. You have a chance to be alone. I'll take that.
Absolutely.
It's one hell of a she shed, as they say these days.
That's
as
what
soon as you get alone, your mind is thinking, I got to get out, I got to go do this, I got to go do that, I got to go do that, until you have to end all those thoughts. So it's always a battle. To be alone for one day is not easy because you have 24 hours and you've got to go through, keep your focus and keep going. So it is a real yoga. It's a real challenge, but it's not a common one. It's not, any kid knows how to be alone.
Your quest, though, is to find your true nature, your true meaning of consciousness. Is that right?
No, I think my quest was just to get rid of the confusion and the chaos and my distorted view of the world and my lack of peace. Were
things like Vietnam occurring at that time? And
Vietnam was, it was during all that time, Kent State and those things, but that's the political world. And all that can go on. You can still be walking down the street and not have to know anything about that.
It's a good lesson because today, in the last few years, like the media has become so big and so dominating as far as what we're, constantly getting information.
It's not that the media has gotten big. We've bought into this medium and we're buying into it, making it our reality. We're being caught in this sensational thing, and we don't know how to put the brakes on because we're hooked on it.
It feels like a trap, and then you see all this division in the world with different facets and political or business interests dividing said media, and people going in different directions, and you don't know what to believe anymore.
You can't even know how to do it. If you're looking at politics, look at countries. Countries are artificial things. You look at war machine and war machinery and making weapons and being able to sell weapons and keeping that business up. Oh boy, that's half of our economy.
It certainly is. I think something like 65% of our taxes go to the Department of Defense.
Yeah. That's you're in the States, so like it's like the whole. It's like the world globalized and it started coming together. And now that there's a need to fight pollution, fight different things, and get climate change, it requires rules to be followed and regulations to be set. And none of the countries want to take any orders. They don't want to go into that. They want to back up from that right now. And as they're backing up, we're getting all this right-wing stuff and this extremism that's ready to fight because they want it back the way it was. It's not going back the way it was. It's just going to cause all this temper tantrums and fights and wars, and then it's going to crash and people are going to be harder and they'll be glad just to get by day again.
Absolutely. I think it's crazy. And you see all these divisions, you see areas that seemed, I don't know, I don't want to say left or right, but like left leaning, like say a new agey type thing. Last night, I didn't even tell you this, Kristen, I was doing some research on the coronal mass ejections that we mentioned in the introduction. Mm-hmm. And I stumbled, a person will remain unknown, but her channel, and it's like some 20-something-year-old girl, and she's at the beach, and she's in a bikini, and she's looking all hot and stuff. She's talking about CMEs. She's clearly selling something else, and then she's talking about ascension, and like all this kind of, I don't know, I want to say dogma, but
if you put words to it, it's not it.
It's kind of like bullshit, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. But bullshit baffles brains, and that's the way it goes. But just so that's so what? This is a meditation. So what? All this stuff's going on. So what? Yeah, but it's this. So what? Yeah, but it's this. So what? Like, here you are today. Here you are now. Can't you think of anything better? Anybody that's sitting meditating, maintaining a little goodness, maintaining their faith, maintaining their good things, is making the world a better place. And the more people do it, the more the gangs and the bullies fall away.
Fascinating. I totally agree, right?
Absolutely.
We're on this. I think so too. I think it's good to turn off the TV and spend a little time alone sometimes. Just sit back, meditate. What do you recommend that people do to kind of break away from the information chain that seems to...
First, you try and get through a day without media. But media includes printed media too, and audio media too. Audio, video, all the media. Just get by without turning anything on. Mm-hmm. It's not so easy. It's easy, but we're not used to it. We don't know how to. We bounce off other things instead of just being ourselves. Everybody can be themselves. Everybody is. You can't not be yourself. It's just you got so much. You're like hermit crabs. We pack up so much stuff we're carrying around. We don't have. We don't know how to just be simple without it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's almost like we don't know how to get through our day without taking a break. But,
well, this is the story. Always people looking for truth for thousands of years. It's never found. It's not found in the churches or the temples or it's found in a war zone. It's found in the desert. It's found on a mountaintop. It's found alone when you're starving or whatever. And that's when the enlightenment comes in. So even that, from that viewpoint, even wars force a lot of people to run into the darkness and then hold deeply onto the light. So, take away the boundaries of countries, take that there's gangs, there's bullies, there's horrible things happen. There's all kinds. There's wars been going on all the time. There's never been a time where there hasn't been a war on the planet.
No, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this time seems bigger to us because it's happening to a colonial country. It's happening to a Western colonial country. But the horrendous things and the images we're getting, it's horrible.
Right.
But in the world, Jupiter and Neptune are conjuncting the planet in Pisces. So this happens in Pisces once every couple of 100 years. And this Jupiter-Neptune has been the buildup of the COVID and the viruses. But technically, it means Jupiter's a planet of luck and understanding of wisdom. Neptune's a planet of faith and belief. So on a high level, it's the understanding and the blossoming of real faith. Mm-hmm. But on a worldly level, Jupiter is misunderstanding and the exaggeration of misunderstanding. And Neptune is illusion and corruption. So you have the exaggeration of misunderstanding of corruption and raw and distorted faith. And it's just out of control. And it's going to be a month before this calms down a little bit, before you see how fanatical everything got.
we've got some time. So if I could, I wanted to work into the astrology, which is what you're known for. You're a world-class astrologer. Some of our audience may not be that familiar with astrology. I mean, there were Ozzy Osbourne songs,
Sharon,
where, they'd say, astrology, it's inside of you and me, don't eat it, or whatever. And I love Ozzy, but, you get a little crazy sometime there in the 80s. And I think that particular song is called Over the Mountain, and it's about astral projection, oddly enough. Maybe you could tell us, like, just a real simple overlay of what astrology is, what it means, because I believe in it. There are connections here, and we know a bit more about it than maybe some of our audience, but maybe we could take it from square one, and we'll talk about those planets, and I have questions about that.
It's a language. Astrology is a language. It's not a science. It's not a religion. It's a language. It's a language of relationships of us to the nature, relationship of us to the heavens and to the movements around it. In one way, you can see it's the music of nature. Okay? Then you can say it's the DNA of the soul, or the DNA of our matrix, of our individual matrix in life. We all have our unique matrices. Everyone's matrix is totally crazy to anybody else's matrix, but each one is valid within its own matrix. And then every now and then the matrix goes through changes and that, but the same pattern gets set up again. So when we're born with certain potentials. We get God-given potentials, and here we are. We got to do the most with what we got. We got our body, we got our potential. We got to grow up and see what we can do. So we take a run at life. We do everything. It's not then it crashes. It didn't happen the way we thought. Then we start saying, well, how could this be? So, like, astrology is like a prayer wheel. Your horoscope is like a prayer wheel. It tells you how the planets work, how the energy is planetary levels of consciousness, different planetary energy, mental thinking, emotional thinking, physical activity. They're all different layers of being, but they're all patterned around in this drawing, in this matrix, in this kaleidoscope, and that symbol is like a prayer wheel. If you detach from it, it allows us to go out into life, and organize it properly so we can do it better than we would if we're just winging it. And we can fine tune it, we can fix up our place and make our world better. But then when it crashes, when we're going out as far as we can possibly go, the same wheel can become a prayer wheel that teaches you how to turn your mind inward, your emotions inward, and begin to get back into God. To get back into your inner center. So it breathes out into the world, so we have our lifetime, we're going out in the world, this is real, this is real, this is real. And sooner or later, we're going to leave our body and we're going to go back to the other side anyways. And we get glimpses of it as we go. So this is a pulsing out into nature, back into life. But when we start looking at the pictures of the sun, and that's just normal nature. The solar flares and that. I mean, usually in the 50s, when they started disturbing radio waves and stuff, they learned to send the radio waves around the back of the Earth instead of directly across the 100 miles in front of you. Where the sun rays would make it, they would send them around. They would detour them around the world, and they'd be able to send the messages even during a sunspot cycle. But let's just take, you have the physical reality and you have a spiritual reality, and they seem to be fighting each other. They're interwoven with each other. But when you look at from the Earth, when you look at the sun or moon in the sky, you see the sun, moon, you see the size of the sun, moon. That sun is 1/2 of 1 degree, as we see it from the Earth. 1/2 of 1 degree. It's 360 degrees. That's 1/2 of 1 degree. That's how much of space when we look at the sun we see, and yet that's enough to provide all our life. When you look from the sun at the Earth, 1/200 or 2/200 of a degree. 2 seconds of 1 minute of 1 degree. That's this tiny little speck from the Earth. The sun it wouldn't even be bothered thinking about it. Wouldn't even notice it. So when it comes to our egos and our identities, our bodies, we're this little speck on this Earth. It's hardly noticeable on the Earth, much less. And even the other planets, our mind, our emotions become these tiny specks from the sun. And these tiny specks are so important. My mind is so important. What I know is so important. What I value is so important. We're really to live and die on these things.
Right. Individual.
And that's just the soul's attachment playing with life. Sooner or later, that's only for a period of time, and you come back. And there's mysteries. When there's a war and you don't take sides, that's horrible. How can you not take a side? At the same in the world. At the same time, there are people on other planes and other things that are just not attached to war and negative thoughts at all. They don't see that. They don't see it like that.
No, when you say things like the houses and the constellations and the planets, have the effect on all these individual realities, it makes you think about things like predeterminism versus.
Yeah, it's daylight. You're fated to have to go through 12 hours of daylight. Oh my goodness, the horror of it. It's nighttime. There's going to be 10 hours a night. Oh, the horror of it. It's fated. It's fixed. Of course, it's totally fated and fixed. What you do with it isn't.
Aha.
That's it right there.
You have choices of how you're going to deal with it.
Right, because
you can choose to go fight the war, or you could choose to play like hell to try and get your light going and try and find a balance and use it to bring more light into the world.
Right. And I mean, one of the things I've never cared for when you see those little very general astrology quips that say, well, you're going to have a good day, a bad day, or whatever. Do I have to, or do
right.
I write those too. It's a generalization. It's a popular thing, and just people who know nothing are curious to see what's happening in the day. And there is an art to doing it. You're doing a generalization. It's not going to hit everybody, but you hit a majority. A number of people would say, "Oh yeah, I can see that," and that's just that medium. That's how most people run into astrology to begin with, but it's much more sophisticated. It's like music. You can see, I can dance to that song. Yeah, but boy, you realize it's a script. There's scenarios, there's different layers, there's different textures, there's nuances between different notes and the different players and how it's going. And you try and write it down, that's a whole other thing.
Right. And
astrology is the written music of nature.
A generalization is just a generalization and should be thought of that way. To get a really in-depth astrological reading, a person should contact somebody like yourself.
Well, yeah, but even a personal reading, I'm just getting my opinion of how I interpret these symbols and these factors in your chart. You're living it. You're the better example of what's going on in your life than I could ever say. I could just tune in a minute and I might have something to say that might affirm or challenge you in some way to pick up something else. So it helps us in growing. It's like it should be in every school. It helps teachers to teach the kids to be the way they are.
To control.
When I had my chart done the first time, I didn't blame astrology. I didn't think about astrology. My reaction was, "You mean I'm supposed to be like this? All my life, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, like this hyperactive kid. Don't do this, oh stop. And I got the chart. It was the first time I ever got affirmation. Yes, you're supposed to be like that. I went, wow, that changed everything. Astrology became a friend. It became a hobby, then became a career. And now 50 years later, it's still an interesting friend.
I know there are many synchronicities and patterns within astrology that, are pretty much things you can verify. What are full moons and new moons, the water on the planet going up and down, the high tides, low tides, the water on our brain pushing and coming up, and how we respond to it's just normal life. It's just part of the texture of it. If people think mankind's going to live off the planet, it's not likely, because we need the moon cycle to have 10 cycles of the moon to be able to gestate the body to be able to make a baby. If a woman tries to get, we may not even be able to conceive off the planet, but being able to bring a baby to full term, it wouldn't be an earth fling. And secondly, it most likely would miscarry because it wouldn't form, because it doesn't have the structure of the moon massaging it, evolving it from the seed level up. So the moon is a specific factor. Planets are a specific factor. They're aligned with the sun. Yeah. What are some other factors in that go into?
Well, each planet is like a level of consciousness. The moon is your past, your memory, your feelings, your sympathy links, anything from the past. So you remember something. Everything before this moment is a memory. It's not real. Everything before this minute is just a memory. Whoa. Here we are now in the reality. Everything before now, everything I know is just a memory. So memories that have changed through dragon life. If I meet someone, I got to tell you, I've been through this. I got to dump all my memories on you so you think you know me. Some memories I wish I didn't know. How do we get rid of them? To just be here now. So that's the moon is your memory. The sun is your sense of importance. I'm going somewhere. I'm going to be somewhere. I'm going somewhere. So from here into the future. Like the moon is here into the past. The sun is here into the future. and your sense of importance of going forward. I'm going to be someone. I'm somebody. I'm here. I know it. That's the confidence of the sun. It's still a bravado. It's not in the moment now. It's not as real as just being here in the moment. In between that, we have our mind, the Mercury. The Mercury is a mind that 88-day cycles. It's how we think in 3-month cycles. We take a course, it's 3 months. Everything fits into these patterns of how we think. And it's just a wave of making sense or making some relative sense out of the memories of the past and the hopes for the future. So the mind works ahead like that. But then you have Venus, which is your emotions. What you like or don't like, what you're attracted to or not attracted to. I don't care what I'm doing, but I'm not going into work if I don't have my Starbucks beforehand. Or if I don't have my Tim Hortons, or I don't have I gotta have my coffee. We all have our habits. This is the moon that we want some better than the others. We want things more than that. This is wanting what we like. Wanting to be loved, wanting to be appreciated. Don't you like me now? I'm doing this. You love me? So it comes out of, we try to get attention. We do artistic things to get attention. It's all Venus elements to be loved. But it's also love and hate. If you don't give me this, I can't stand you. So the emotions, it's really our emotional magnetism, is Venus. So when we want something, whether it's the next door neighbor's wife, or whether it's a dog, or whether it's $1 million, or we just want to get laid, or whatever, when we want something, that's Venus. If I can't get laid, then I gotta have a drink. If I can't have a drink, then I gotta have a chocolate or something. So alcoholism is a Venus problem. Because you're not getting what you want, or you don't have your self-worth, and I'm going to have a drink and pass it on. Deal with it. So, but the Venus, the emotions, this is a whole sphere in our being. Whenever we want something, it seduces the way we think. So we're trying to think clearly, make sense of the past and future, and get some plan about it, and then it gets colored by what we desire. I gotta smoke up. I gotta have a drink. It colors our whole interpretation and twists it, and then we think it's reality, and it's just what we're desiring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a search for meaning, really.
It can be totally crazy, like Putin thinking he owns Ukraine and he's got to kill everybody if they're not going to go along with him. Mm-hmm. He's mad. He's crazy.
Psycho.
It's anybody who kills people is crazy. They've lost it. Mm-hmm. That's just done. So anyways, that's the Venus. These are inner planets, the Mercury and Venus, inside our physical body, the Earth. So that our body is the ego, the Earth, the separateness of being separate. We have our Venus and our emotions and our mind inside of that. And we have our purpose, how confident we are as our sun. And the moon goes back and forth, inside and outside. Sometimes we're feeling inwardly, sometimes we feel we got to go out. And the moon pulls us in and out. Then you get the outer planets. Mars is how we put energy out. It's the energy you have. It's not good or bad. It's just energy. What do you do with it? Don't get in my way. In relationships, you have energy. You give somebody all your energy and you just bliss them out, and they're totally, wow, they love me. But then there's the other part, you take it back. Where'd you go? How come you not giving me this?
Sure.
Because in relationships, as soon as someone thinks you're the ultimate person in the world and the greatest person in the world, this is trouble, because it's flattering, but you take it, and you're going to have to live up to their expectations of what they think their ideal person should live.
Expectations, key word, yeah.
And how that other person should live isn't really real. That breaks a lot of relationships. So these things, by what we put out and the experiences we get, so the desire for experience, we've got to try this, I got to do this, let me do it myself, that's Mars. Understanding it and assimilating what's right or what's wrong of the things we can do, that's Jupiter. And Saturn is the limits, the structure of what we're capable of doing. Of how strong we are, how weak we are, how long we got to live, what we've done with our time, and what we haven't done with our time, what we haven't accomplished. So these are the main planets that you can sit, 5 main planets you see with your eyes, the sun and the moon. These are the 7 main planets, which are the 7 days of the week, which have been given importance to all of religions. It's the main structure of the language behind all of this stuff. It goes back to this essential understanding. But even then, that's just the mechanics of the matrix of life. It's not the spirit and the silence of the soul and the spirit, which permeates all of that. So these two things are going on, and we're a mix of all of it. So we just, we're winging it, we're going along, we're doing this, we're having this thing go great, hey, it's great, oh, it's terrible, oh, this is terrible. And sometimes we develop a need to ask how come, or get deeper. And nobody goes deeper if they haven't been heartbroken or hurt or devastated. They don't go deeper. And then you find other people have been going through that, and they have books or those things that help you find yourself a bit more, or help you go inward a bit more. Tools. And that you would call our spiritual work. It's all spiritual work. Even when we're going out, we're working out something, so we don't have to bring it back in. We got to get that done. So there's no spirit without honesty. Honesty, if your desire is, I got to go do this, go get it done. Get it over with. Don't bother me, and then we can get back to peace.
Do you think that consciousness on a planet, on an individual level, people have a goal that they need to achieve in this existence, this consciousness as a human being?
We have a need to feel we've accomplished something with our time. And based on whether we've accomplished something with our time or not accomplished something with our time, we get inhibited or restricted or feel accomplishment, we achieve things. And yeah, that's a fabric part of life. But then there's people, there's this, what was it they said in the Taoism? They say if someone wants to change the world, do something, they have to feel that they're going to have to do it, because no doubt it's perfect the way it is. How could this be perfect with wars and everything else going in? That's the puzzle.
Do you think that consciousness recycles?
Yeah, consciousness changes. It has layers, there's dimensions, it fluctuates, and our experience of it depends on the frequency that we're living on, the frequency of what consciousness we see. But even with that, that's one layer of experiencing consciousness. But then there's the silence behind it that's so simple it transcends all the consciousness. That becomes total nonsense. And that's the gateway to your spirit. It's nonsense. Totally.
You believe every action has a reaction. So you believe in karma.
Yeah, it's karma. Karma is one part of it. That's just part of the cycle. The war is the karma of built up hatred and built up anger and fear.
Oh, absolutely.
For years. This has been going on for years. This war isn't just this week or this month. It's just an eruption coming now. Like
right.
You see, I mean.
Historically, we're a warring, creature on the planet.
We're educated and conditioned to be historical and make history irrelevant. History is the important thing in the sequence. And from history is really a distortion, because it's history from wherever point of view you're looking at.
That's excellent.
So it's, what was it? The Greeks have a thing, they say, between chronos and chronos. There's, all life is a steady, it's a flux of just consciousness. It's just a flux. It's unideal. It's just pure substance there. But it doesn't become conscious until someone starts counting. There's no music until someone starts counting. There's no consciousness until 1, 2, 3, 4, every third, so many counts. Whatever, however we start counting, making relevance, we build up these mental structures, which is our matrix. Of course, every now and then our matrix can get flapped, and the program gets changed. It's still in the matrix, but our program gets changed. We have to reorient, and we do that many times, many lifetimes even, and tell what's the purpose of it all. We gain every experience, and once we've gained all the experience, we don't need to be here anymore. But in that point, when you get to the point where you don't need to be here anymore, some beings stay there for a little while longer, even though they don't need to be here, to just pass on some teachings to help other people. We're lucky to get them. We're lucky if we find them.
I love that you give the planets, like you call them things that imply that they have a consciousness in and of their own. And I kind of believe this. I think there are levels of consciousness. We talk about it a lot on the show. We talk about panpsychism. We talk about
it's like a rock and roll band.
You
have the sun, you have the main drummer, and then you have the different instruments being the different ones. Each one's got their own theme and their own play, and they can be harmonized or dissonant with each other. And they go along, and suddenly the song comes out, and people are dancing to it.
That's awesome.
If someone makes a mistake, no one even notices. Yeah. Except the guy who did it, or the person who did it. So, but the whole thing is still a band. It's still part of the symphony. We're born. The whole universe is a symphony. We come in and we're born for our little 90 years, and we want to make our 90 years this hugely important thing. And really, our life is that we're like this one little rivet on the edge of a cymbal, of a big drum cymbal with 1,000 rivets in a drum section with 1,000 cymbals. And then the band is going on, the symphony is going on, and we get this one out, that's our life, and we want it to be meaningful. It is for us.
That's very true.
Excellent. I love that. And I do think there are both higher and lower forms of consciousness, things like angels, demons, these hierarchies that get talked about, planets. They're all patterns, it's starting from the subatomic level up.
Yeah, this is where you get into psychic energy. So we all have our psychic energy above and beyond this. The psychic energy is what we empower. We're thinking something, we have a sensation, we like this, we do this, we're thinking this, we empower, this is important. We give our psychic energy to these things, and it fluctuates up and down incredibly. But we get very high intuitions and very gross low things. You have the gods and demons, you have the good and the bad, all in this psychic level. When you get beyond the psychic level, beyond that, and you get the spiritual light and being, there's none of this stuff. It burns through the good and the bad. It's just clearly simple light just being there. And that's the simplest thing there is. Hardest thing to maintain. But so there's a good book that talks about that. It's an Indian book, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And it talks about how to separate the psychic phenomena in our life from the spiritual being that we are. It's very lucid. It was really helpful to me because I thought, oh, look at that, and it allowed me to see that distinction, which I've been thinking about and wondering about ever since for the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Right. Well, it is a lot to wrap your head around, right? It's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot to unpack.
As we like to say.
Even to know that it's so is a big breakthrough. That it could be so. So if you run across this seems all crazy to you. Is it true? Is it not? Sleep on it. You'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we agree.
If what's real and useful to you will come to you. So same way with doing readings in astrology. Really, in reading, you're just giving your opinion and your take on how that should be for someone else. But sometimes you see blind spots that the other person's being but can't see. And sometimes you can talk about it and it makes breakthroughs. And it can allow someone to move on with something when they've been held back.
Now, a person that says they have or does prove out that they have psychic abilities, what is that in reference to astrology? Do you need to be part psychic to do astrological?
Everybody's psychic.
Or is it simply
everybody's psychic? We just have our qualities polluted to various degrees. We don't have it refined as well. You're with someone, you can think what they're thinking. You're with someone and they're thinking badly or thinking about someone else. You can feel, hey, what are you thinking about? Where are you going? What's happening? Why aren't you here with me anymore? We feel it. That's instinctive.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's psychic.
Like Lindsay Milne says, he's a very, what I call a from the gut psychic. He just feels it. He knows
he's a super sensitive. He's a super sensitive intuitive that's lived with his extra sensitivity through his life. Hasn't made it necessarily easier, but he's protected it and kept it as a good vehicle to express himself.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have a question for you on the audience. Let me bring this up. This is Cass Clark. She asked, what are premonitions? Is everything written for us beforehand? Kind of hearkening back to that predeterminism versus free will.
Yes and no. Yes and no. It's usually a premonition is based on the monition. The monition, like what we're doing, sets up a relativity, and this is going on, and we get a sense, this is going somewhere, this isn't going somewhere, or this is going somewhere bad, or this could happen. So we set up where we are in the phase of our cycle, sets up a certain theme or attitude, and from that attitude, the intuitions can come up. That's leading here. That's leading, depending on what level of consciousness, how sensitive or aware you are. You can pick a very gross symbol and not know what it means, or you pick up a very high symbol and not know what it means, or you may get something that's really clear. I'm not supposed to do this. This is going to go somewhere. I believe in this. I mean, most of our business we're doing a business. You want to start a business? You got to intuit it. You want to start your show? You're going to feel it's going somewhere. I can see it's going to go somewhere. We're going to do it. We got the premonition. Let's go. Let's find out what happens. So it's a part of the texture of time and part of the texture of relationship to time. But it's not, premonitions are not factors that are beyond time.
I think time is just an aspect of humanity. Once we move beyond this, I think time doesn't make a difference at all.
Well, when we move beyond it, we're beyond it. Once we're not here, we're not here. And then at that point, we realize how much of a restriction being here is. While we're here, it's a glory. It's not a restriction. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Absolutely. Just a comment. Ken says, as an occultist, I've come to understand and know that things are at the very least, very sentient. I would agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the sentience, everyone has that total peacefulness, that total transcendence. It's all there. And it goes right to the limits of thought and beyond, right to the limits of perception and beyond. All of that, it's there. So it's just degrees of the texture of sentience. So like, it's anything that touches sentient, it opens you up, it makes it more sensitive, you see it. But when that happens, it also challenges your life. If you know that, then you have to live more sensitively. If you have to be more sensitive, then you have to live more sensitively to everyone you know.
Right.
And if you see, like, if you pick up somebody's going to die, you get an image. You can see someone's brother's dying or someone's friend's dying. They didn't ask you. You're just at the place you got this image. Do you say something or don't you? Just because you got it, are you important enough that it's worth saying to upset the other person beforehand, or do you say it and ask questions to get them? Maybe you should call your brother, or maybe you should do something. Right. So there's still choices of how you deal with these impressions. We're connected like this.
Right. We've asked various psychics on the show several times, actually, that very question. If you see somebody is going to die, you get that impression. Approach it? Do you touch it? Do you leave it alone? Do you make recommendations? Because it's such a heavy question.
You know, it happens a lot. Sometimes it's enough to say, when's the last time you called your brother? You know, we haven't talked in 5 years, you know, and maybe you call him maybe just before something happens, like, as opposed to if the person dies and then you don't get a chance to talk to them again. Sooner or later, we're going to die and we leave everybody else behind, or we go beyond. And like, what's relative here is no longer relative. But while we're here, astrology is the map of nature. It's the map of how we navigate. It's the map of how our ego experiences things and collects experiences and works through life. It's the common sense of life. And it's not, even though it's set, there's hardly a limitation of it. If we could be 7% of our potentials, we'd be geniuses in today's world. We're going around with less than interest rates on our life because we don't tap all of the potentials of everything we could do.
Right. We were talking earlier before the show about ancient civilizations and how I love Göbekli Tepe, and I feel that there's some kind of a there may be a constellation reference in some of the pictures depicted there. And I was just wondering, do you know anything about Göbekli Tepe? Have you ever seen?
No, I'm not sure the name is. I mean, there's the Dogon tribe in Africa.
Yes.
That had maps of Sirius, and they had maps of, they had relations to Sirius. They knew things about it that we only just discovered recently. Right. And that's from thousands of years ago. There's human beings. There's beings that were alive. They're finding remnants of bodies and things 100,000 years ago.
Right.
That's our history. 5,000 years at best, and even that is a distortion of it.
Exactly, and they don't want to. The mainstream archaeological people, or whatever, the archaeology departments don't want to fund people who are going to mess up our day-to-day.
Universities are set up to make people think in boxes so they can find jobs and careers and fit into the system.
Exactly.
They're not geared to be conscious and aware and open. Like, if you take people who study literature and English, you're not going to find a good poet who's been through university. You're going to find a good poet on the streets who learned a few words who can really talk about things.
True. Yeah, that's extremely true. Yes. Or same thing with philosophy and it's just stuff like that. But it's true, though, if we're going to screw up like our entire history books because somebody doesn't want to, or the government, whoever it is, doesn't want anybody else to mess with their thought of history now.
Yeah. And there's so many different takes on this. Like, to me, violence is a horrible thing. Right. It doesn't, whether it's men or women, it's just about that is there at all is a bad thing. But still, like, we're looking at all these things, we're looking at all these heavy implications. It's still a miracle to be alive, to hold your kid, to see it, to touch your grandkid. Oh my goodness, they steal your heart. So many incredible things happen in a moment.
Right.
While we're here, how can you fault the experience? It's an incredible experience.
That's right. I think unconditional love binds us all. right?
Absolutely.
And I think when we were talking about the constellations, Kirsten, we were talking about Scorpio, right? So
Yes.
in this Göbekli Tepe, this a landmark discovery of a civilization that seems to predate everything mainstream science says, you see pictures of scorpions and other possible constellations carved within the rocks upon it, and we ask ourselves, like, is that something that they saw, recognized? Was there a bigger influence to them, this culture that,
see, I grew up with astrology. It's nonsense. It's not real. It's been written out of the books of being real or being pseudoscience or whatever.
Exactly.
But I've come to the terms that most scientists don't deserve to know astrology. They don't deserve to know how people are connecting and how we're connected to life. They're just thinking in a little cerebral sugar way.
Right. In a box. They need to think outside the box as well. It's that Göbekli Tepe is rumored to be like almost 12,000 years old. So I agree with you about the consciousness.
And I think there was a greater awareness, and there were times beforehand that had much greater intelligence than we have today.
Absolutely. We talk about that a lot as well.
Yeah, we do believe that there were civilizations older than that. And when the continents...
we get pieces, we get moments. If we're in the right space, we tune into it, we get information from that. And then we're challenged to make it relevant into our world when no one else around us is going to be relevant to.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. If it's relevant to you, that's enough.
Right. More people need to, we're so conditioned that nobody really wants to, when they hear people speak like us and you, and they don't, like, a lot of people don't want to look up and or talk about this stuff or even think about this stuff because they just need to go to work and they need to take care of and they need to do this and need to do that, but in society. But
the difficulty with universities and our system, where our world is, we have, and science, we have a buildup of the religion of atheism. And as the religion of atheism is growing faster than anything else, it's countering anything about love, about belief, about faith, about these inner teachings. And this battle comes in. So, in that perspective, a war like Ukraine is making people pray, oh God, oh whatever, what's faith? But it's also making other people hate. And like, it's forcing those issues, it's stirring up that pot. It's changing the world. Like, that's like, if you look at the century as last century as a world war, an economic world war, this is just one more step in the battle of it.
It certainly is, yeah.
And it's going to, okay, it's everything. It's all these horrible things. Yeah, okay, still, here you are today. What are you doing? You're going to live in the darkness, or you're going to, how are you living your life today? You're going to hug your kid? You're going to take a walk in the park? You're going to do, like, yes, we help where we can. At the same time, some of these things are planned things planned out by different businesses and corporations and things that plan out there, and it's just working business battles out. And it's killing people. How can this even be? One day there might be a global government that doesn't let anybody get killed or any wars happen. But when that global government comes in, there'll be global police forces to enforce it, and which nobody's ready to take either.
Sure. There's a balance between spiritualism and materialism, and it's something we all have to come to grips with as a human civilization, I think.
There's a balance as long as you're in the world.
It's such a where people, fought over God, and they did these things that drives people to be atheist. I mean, I felt that myself. Like, I want to shed myself of all dogma, because I'm like, no, screw that. I don't want any part of that, because, you do terrible things, or there's the priests that are the pedophiles or whatever, and you start associating spiritual.
These gossip lines and these memories of getting back at someone, it's all this pettiness. They still... you get pulled into, we interpret things, we don't have to, like this, like religions and different religions, they're just systems of thinking. They're educational systems. They're old school education systems. They have some teachings within it. They've carried on a teaching for thousands of years, but it's crystallized in such a way that it's unlivable almost. And yet the teachings, you'll get more enlightened by Jesus by being alone on the mountain by yourself, or being alone and being somewhere, or just being in the ghetto and helping kids and helping people and helping things. You'll find that more than by we're all right. This is the right way to do it. And this is the right way to do it. So like, it's not that it's better. It's better that there's religions than there weren't any. But some people question that. At the same time, there's teachings that are greater than that permeate the religions that people are getting access to now and are being persecuted. The same way Jesus was persecuted when he had his special insights, when he had his openings.
Science, materialist science, only has this small perspective of what people are really feeling and are existing. There's the big question of philosophy and like, why are we here?
I didn't know. We didn't mean to get to all this heavy, deep stuff like this. We were just going to.
We all do. Our listeners do as well. So
I agree. I think it's a balance between those things. We need to know what's real, but at the same time, you can't lose that spirit. And I felt that way for a long time. I really hated religions and all of it, and felt very atheist, if you will. And I've come to circle back to start to feel some sort of spiritual connection to nature, to the woods, and remember these things. And when it was like Kristen and I growing up, we loved going in the woods and that sort of thing, and being close to nature and what that is, and understand what it is to be present. And I think these are very important topics that get overlooked in our matrices, if you will.
But if you get to your if you get a few moments of silence each day, it clears the matrix, it clears the thought patterns, it clears the judgments, it clears all these cycles, and it gives you a chance to refresh it and come at it new and see it in new light. And as it builds up again the next day, you come at it. So I do a consultation with someone one day. I have to chant for 2 or 3 hours the next day to get rid of it before I can talk to someone else, because I'll still have the other person's energy still in me. So I have to work really hard to get clear,
Feel it.
to be free to talk to the next person.
Sure. That reminds me of psychics that maybe wear gloves sometimes. They don't want to touch anything. They're dealing the cards, and they say, all right, we'll turn over your cards, or they don't want to touch it. They have to have a physical barrier, or it'll barrier.
I see the ones that touch and get impressions from rings, or get impressions from things. They're super physically sensitive. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Part of my accent. I am from Massachusetts. I said barrier.
I do understand that. Kaz Clark had a question. She asked, do you believe there is a divine creator?
Of course. It's whether you call it the creator or not, but and I believe that the personal elements in life are just as valuable as the impersonal. And that's a yin and yang, and that's still part of the cycles of consciousness. And there's something that includes all the personal sides too. So there's many ways to come up the mountain to God. And you can get it from an impersonal sense of oneness, of the abstractness, or you can get it from the personal sense of praying and being personal. Both are valid, but the personal is probably more cherished.
And there's energy in all things, right? I mean, when we look at the other side and you go, or what science say, they talk about a big bang, which is an explosion of energy, this perfect energy that creates this balance, these patterns.
And explosion still had to come from somewhere.
It had to come from somewhere.
Right. We agree with you.
Right.
So it's so what? We can get all these explanations. We build up our mental structures, and people and civilization build huge mental structures of perception. Incredible, beyond where we are. And they're there, but they're still only structures of mental perception. As soon as we get beyond that, there's no bad difference across it. It's one all across the board.
Anne-Marie Young says, turn off the TV and go hug a tree. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. It's just hopefully they don't put the tree on the TV.
Yeah, right. Hopefully those don't become the only trees we see eventually, right? And, we still have forests and oxygen to maintain ourselves, and we don't live underground like moles.
As long as we're here. Who knows? So you look at the planet, it looks like mankind is a bacteria on the planet that's killing other things.
Yes, we agree with you.
And if that's so, it's enough just to not make it worse.
Marilyn Mazzata kind of commented on that question. She says, perhaps the question should be, do you believe in something bigger than yourself? As a spiritualist reverend, we say the God of your understanding.
Yes, it's to me, it's not so much, it's way bigger than myself. Of course, it's huge, it's everything. But that, as soon as you say it's everything, it's so simple, it's transcendent to all the definitions of what's not. It's just a simple innocent openness.
So the Big Bang happens. All these patterns and things seem to exist in nature. That points you as an astrologist on the way to forecasting what might be in store for a person. I mean, it's certainly not a coincidence. What are some of the other factors that you look for?
Well, astrology is a funny thing. It's kind of like washing dishes. Okay? So you got dishes. You're going to have supper. You have dishes. And everybody has dishes. Some people are cleaning the dishes. They're making their dinner. They're cleaning the dishes as soon as they're using, when they're being on top of, they're being really dirty, and it's all cleaned up before they even eat.
Yes.
Other people, they cook their dinner, they have their dinner, they come back, and then, okay, they'll get up after and they wash the dishes. Other people, I just leave it. The heck, when they go to sleep the next day and let it pile up, and sooner or later, there's so many dishes, they buy a new pot rather than clean the dishes. Mm-hmm. So, like, it could be ahead of the time, behind the time, or on time. And we're doing that with our life. We can be ahead of the time, behind the time, or just sloppy and way behind the time. And there's a karma involved in each.
We call the dishes a conspiracy. We also call laundry conspiracy.
yeah, but it's also service.
It is, yes, yes.
If you don't take care of it, what are the kids going to do? There's this thing that we learn things like, if a woman who's had a kid and brought up a kid, they've done the biggest thing in the world. If you can bring up a kid and they get through and they're okay, that's incredible. But if two women meet and they're in their 50s or 60s and one's had a kid, a couple of kids, the other hasn't had a kid, there's totally different realities, because the one who hasn't had a kid is just going to look like a kid to the mother who brought up kids.
Sure.
They don't see the texture the same way. It's not that they're less spirit. It's not that they're less of a soul. These are different accumulations of experience in their matrix.
We can take some of this same topics and turn it to music, right? So science tells people that brain chemicals go off in their brain when you hear music. I can't imagine that this is by accident. So it doesn't change the fact that music enlightens people. And the Celestial Harp is an instrument that you play. And I was hoping you could tell us about that. I'm going to share your page, which is, I believe, celestialharp.com.
Okay. That's the performance we did at the Forest Woodhenge. Yeah. So the harp was an idea. Like, I always believed color and sound can heal almost anything. The right proportions of color and sound can heal most diseases on the planet. So as I learned astrology, as astrology came into me, which came as a vision first, I saw these things of color and music there. I didn't even know what it was at the time, but later on it became obvious it was about music. I learned music. I built this musical instrument to play a horoscope. And we're so used to music in a straight line. It goes up this straight line, that this is a square. It's a square instrument with a circle in the middle, a circle of frets, and a spiral bridge. So it has a spiral, a circle. So there's no beginning or end to it. So you play around it. There's a space factor to it. It's not a straight line. It changes the nature of music. So I had this vision of it for years, and then it took 6 years to design it, 2 years to build it, then another 10 years to try and get the first good tuning system and play it. Now it's about 34 years old, and I'm still learning how to play it.
Wow.
So the idea was to play your horoscope. Each string is a week of the year or a section of the zodiac, and you can put your chart and play those strings and play the chart. They can do so many other things. Music is so incredible.
72, Robin?
Yeah.
What's in there?
72 strings, but there's 8 double strings. So it really is 64 placements, string placements,
like
for the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching.
When you say double strings, you mean two real close together, like a 12-string guitar?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is so amazing.
That's at the corner. It divides the eightfold thing. So it's like a mandala that takes the eightfold path, it divides it, puts the I Ching around it, and puts the stars in related around it, so you can see where the stars are around that. So if you knew your stars and you knew these things, you could look at this at the cover at the top of this instrument, and you'd know it was made in the 1970s because of the alignment of the stars, the equinoxes.
Wow.
Cheapers.
Wow. Yes. Obviously, a lot of thought went into that. I think this is just amazing. I mean, being a at least former musician in my past life, and I create the music that's on the show and stuff.
Just a musician.
I think it's like fascinating to have this like 3-dimensional table-like instrument.
It's made for 3 or 4 people to play at the same time.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And do you go into like a different trance state or something like?
It just changes. It's its own experience. It's its own experience. You get 4 or 5 people playing, and the lead changes, the speed changes, the tones change. It's not, you can't structure a piece. You're going 5 or 10 minutes. You're just getting into the song.
Mm-hmm.
I can
So
imagine.
like jazz, it's how do you end it? Where do you end it? You're caught in. You can't get out of it.
I can imagine just playing that and feeling the vibrations of not only the strings, but into yourself, the other people's energy, everybody's energy, as well as the vibrations of the instrument.
That was the dream, and I saw it. Then I had to build it. It took 10 years or 2 years, 6 design, 2 years to build it, 10 more years to get the tuning system, and that was about $5,000 worth of strings I had to use up to try. Got to try sitar strings to try and find to get strings that would work best with the instrument. Then I had to start learning. In early 90s, I started to make an album a year with it.
Fantastic.
As I started making, I got 30 albums, but CDs are dead. So I put them on the web, and they're there. So it's been done. But it was a great experience. It brought me up to a level where I could see how how sound, and astrology are all the same thing. They're all part of the same language. It's all part of the same measuring field.
The frequencies to each.
Yes, the vibrations and the frequencies. Everywhere there's a frequency, even within an atomic particle frequency, if you took that frequency, you could divide it into the zodiac. It's just a scale. You could divide it into 12 sections.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's synthesization, right? To be able to see the sounds, play them. And I imagine like with the improvisation, the energy or music, the notes are just flowing through a person playing this. When you say you're playing someone's horoscope, it's probably, does it feel like it's coming from somewhere else and flowing through you? Like
just playing it creates a different approach to music than a straight line music. So then when I got to realize I worked on the scales, and I finally found that the scales, I write my music differently now. I use 6 lines and 6 spaces, not 5 lines. And as soon as I went to 6 lines and 6 spaces, it fit to the 12 signs of the zodiac, it fit to the 12 colors, it fit to the 12 sounds, and all of a sudden, how come this wasn't used before?
Right.
In some ways, it was used before, but it never became mainstream.
Do you have
That's the first showing of the harp. That picture with me when I was a young man, when that was just finished. That one, yeah.
Are there recordings on here where people can go to the Celestial?
Yeah, all the recordings are on the site. Yeah.
And hear what it sounds like?
Yeah.
Excellent.
You don't have it next to you? Do you have it next to you at all?
A what?
Do you have it next to you at all? Like,
no,
Kaz
no.
asked if we could hear it. So that's why I asked you if it was near you.
You'd probably be better to, if you're on the site there, if you clicked into the CDs or the videos, you could click on it and get any one of them in there. Maybe the video would be.
Get it right from the side.
My God, just get the hell out of me.
So I'm chanting, and in this one, this is not really so musical. I'm chanting, and this harp is playing behind it as a drone.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So cool.
You don't hear the harp so well on this. Choose one of the other ones.
Okay.
No, not on this cut. You come out of this, back up from out of this album.
He is.
Let's see if you can go into that and go into the CDs. Let's see. Go under 1 second. I'll tell you which one to go into. Return to turning point. Down here. So 5 down. Yeah.
Got it.
And play return the first one. Yeah, return to turning point.
Oh, that song reminds me of Xanadu and Rush.
Yeah.
You're thinking the same.
Xanadu.
I love that song. That's beautiful.
You get lost in these for a long time, you know?
Yeah, it's very pretty, very soothing.
I love it. And I love how I hear dissonant notes that really shouldn't work together, but are. And then it transitioning into something, and then it makes sense. Like, now I understand what that note.
It took 20 years or 30 years to get the tuning systems lined up to be a tuning system that fits the color, that fits to the zodiac, that fits to the harp that was playing and that would play. So you have the different scales for the different signs, but when you're playing around the whole harp, you have the dissonant notes coming in as just part of reality.
Excellent. Kristen Johnson says,
"Oh, come on!
Chanting is beautiful." Yes, it is.
I was answering Anne Marie Young. She said, "Nice."
We just like to have fun. That is awesome. I really like that. Yeah, I didn't realize ahead of the interview what you had on there with that, and I was curious. So thank you.
Yes,
that is the chanting. I'm sorry. The celestialharp.com is the name of that website.
You have to put the on it, thecelestialharp.com. Yeah.
So I need to let them know if they're listening just on audio. But you have some other websites, and the Henge you mentioned.
That's what I was just going to ask you.
Something else we wanted to talk about a little bit.
The fourth Henge. Now, where is that? I know about the.
Well, it came as an idea, and a friend of mine had some land. And I was talking to him. I said, he said, I always wanted to build a Woodhenge. I said, I know how to make them, but I never had a place to make them. And we looked at each other and said, okay, let's do it. So this was back in 2007. Mm-hmm. And so we got together, went into his place. Just the two of us. We were both in our 60s, so I was older than him, but we just went in and we found the place. We cleaned out the area in this forest, and we cut down some trees. We got the wood. We cleaned them out and made the post. And we set the posts up, and we set it up like a super sundial, so that we did all the measurements by the sun shadows. So like when it would be noon, the sun would line up the shadows in the post. The center post would all have the shadows to be lined up to each other.
Wow!
So at every noon, and in the winter, that would be very long shadows. In the summer, it would be very short shadows. But this was when it was first started. This is the first year. I think we got 32. No, it was the second year, and then we did 16 posts. 16. We did about 30 posts the first year, 30 posts the second year, like this, and then we finally put up 64 posts in 3 years. And once we built it up, those were the original drawings I made to try and show how the shadows would work around it. So then, it's really based on the I Ching and on the zodiac, on the equinoxes and solstices, and watching the shadows and so on. So it's to build a sacred space. So it took 5 years. It took 3 years to build it. We had the benefit of it for 3, 4, 5 years. Then they started to rot. Then some of the trees started to rot and started to go. Now it's no longer. It's come and gone. So, but we had a great time, and we did drumming there. We did chanting there. We had different issues. We had to go into the woods to do it. So it was like an alchemical adventure. This is what the land would have looked like before we started building it. We had to cut down the trees and clear it out. For two guys, it was a crazy thing, but it was just alive when we did it.
It's almost like shamanic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was. It was a special space.
Yes.
It seems beautiful. I love it. And as previously mentioned, I know Kristen and I never feel closer to spirit, source, God, whatever we want to call it, than we were in nature.
Yeah. This Amanita.
Amanita.
That was one of the mushrooms that grew around the Woodhenge.
Well, no problem with that.
See, that's the lineup from north-south, the one you just saw, where you're looking north-south. But it's just, as it became bigger and became the full I Ching and the full 126 posts, it became really a maze that you could walk in and it had this presence to it. I put, underneath each post, we put special things, like some jewels, some special things from family. Oh, we put special things on it. We made a little mojo bang, put underneath each post.
Come on.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
And then when we finished it, I got a CD and I put teachings of all the different masters around the world that we have in history. I put them all on the CD and put them on top of the posts so they would reflect that knowledge going up into the heavens.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's fantastic. Even mojo bags, a hoodoo reference. So also like.
So it was a special space. So that was 10 years, but it was a great adventure.
I bet. My goodness.
Now, were they offerings to specific spirits that you were leaving at the base of those posts?
No, I would do chanting inside of it, and I would go around and chant around between each post and move around and go through the circle. It'd take an hour or so to go through that.
And do you maintain the henge now?
No, the henge is gone. It's dissolved. It's back to nature.
Oh.
Trees, like some of the trees were preserved, the inner ones, so that they were sort of standing longer. But some of the bigger ones were about 25 foot high. They were pine trees, but they rotted out after about 5 years, and they started crumbling. And then the property was sold, and that was the end of it.
Oh.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
But it improved my chanting 100% by having built it. I got my chanting in while I was doing it and building it, and the chanting stayed with me. So for me, it was a stage of developing my chanting.
That is just wonderful.
And what is it about chanting that draws you? Does it create a meditative state?
It undoes the mind. Like a kid who doesn't want to listen to something that's going, wow, 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 wow. Chanting does that to the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're thinking, and if I'm thinking and I try to chant, I'll chant harder. Like my chant is Hari Om is my main chant. I would chant Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, and I'd buzz it, and then I sit for a moment, and suddenly it's peaceful. There's no thoughts. But at the same time, I could get that at state just by continuous chanting and counting it on for half an hour or an hour. And for, like, if you're going to chant, the best way to start this, you take 5 minutes every morning and every night. I'm going to chant, you chant Hari Om for 5 minutes in the morning. Not more, just 5 minutes. And you do it again at night. And once you've done that for 3 months and you look back, you realize you've cleaned out your psyche. And it's because that 5 minutes a day, morning and night, without breaking the chain, is more powerful than once a week for 2 or 3 hours. Because it becomes regular, because it's habit linked into your habits and your basic nature. And like after a month, for about an hour before you're anticipating I'm going to be doing it subliminally. Then after you've done it, it has an effect for an hour or so. So each one, the morning and night, they have this effect. After 2 months, it has effect for maybe 3 or 4 hours before and 3 or 4 hours after. But after 3 months, when you finish 3 moon cycles and you look back, you're anticipating 6 months, 6 hours before you're meditating, and you're anticipating, and it covers it. It has an energy to protect you for another 6 months, 6 hours, and then for the next 6 hours, you're anticipating next. So the first time you have 24 hours where you're chant conscious or God conscious without breaking it, even though you're still living your life and doing other things. But you can't see it till you do the 3 months. But once you see that, then it's easy to pick it up from 5 minutes to 10 minutes and steadily build it up. But that 5 minutes, it's not too demanding. It's curiosity, let's play, but you begin to see the effects of it fairly quickly.
So for our listeners that will just hear this in a podcast, I do want to recap and say that the Celestial Harp is a table-like looking instrument, meaning that strings are all coming from the center of the table where they're attached. There are patterns on the table that have... They
go over a spiral bridge,
and
it goes out over a circle of frets. And then there's a square bridge. It's a double-bridged instrument. It's acoustic and percussive. You can pluck it and you can hammer it and you can slide it. And it's like having your rhythm, lead, and bass all on the same instrument.
And they spread out through the table. So every side of the table has strings, and you could walk around the table and play it, just to give you a three-dimensional verbal aspect of it.
And the aspects in the chart, if you're playing an opposite string, there's a dissonance. If you're playing a triad, what strings have a texture of the sound that's similar to the horoscope.
And how would you describe the henge to somebody who could only hear this?
I just call it a super sundial, a super sundial of wood posts in a field, like Stonehenge, only it's a Woodhenge. But it's aligned to the north south. It's aligned to the shadows and to the earth, so you can see the shadows and the effects of the shadows. So it becomes an astrological mandala.
How many posts were planted?
126.
126 posts.
I think it was.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful to see, and I love it.
For each post, the tree had to be cut down, the barks had to be cut off, the bark had to cut off, the branches cut off, smoothed out. A post hole had to be dug 4 feet deep through stones and rocks and roots, and then placed in. So it was, we see the posts, but it was a lot of work to do that.
Sure. And those who want to see that are maybe just listening, or if you're watching, you can see the henge by going to forestwoodhenge.com.
See, with the harp, the ultimate, the Woodhenge was built on the I Ching and astrology. The harp was built on the I Ching and astrology. Each string is I Ching hexagram. And my ultimate thing was I brought the harp into the forest with a big tackle. I did a performance, and a video performance of the harp in the middle of the Woodhenge, and there's a video on the site on the Woodhenge I think it's on both sites. It's on the Celestial Harp site of playing the harp in the Woodhenge, and I played the horoscope of the moment as I was playing it in the middle of that. So that was like one of my creative peaks.
It's amazing. We are definitely going to watch that.
It's so cool. I love all this stuff that you're doing. You have another website I want to bring up, if you don't mind. And this one features on the homepage a picture of a little bit younger Robin Armstrong.
That's the day that picture is from the day I came out of the room after 13 months being alone without seeing anybody or anything.
Wow.
On the very day. And you have robes. You're now dressed after spending 15 months naked in a cave, which reminds me of that show, Naked and Afraid.
Naked and Afraid.
Right. Like, I'm not sure I could handle being naked in a cave for 15 months.
I'm still trying to figure out if I can handle it.
Yeah.
I wonder, if like creatures, would be crawling up my leg or something, getting to my privies.
Oh, it happened in there. I mean, when you're alone in the place, there's a time when a tarantula came up into the room and walked around the room. I'm the only piece of meat in the room. Then that time when lizards would come up and eat the tarantula. Things would happen.
Oh my gosh! I can only imagine
doing that, but not now. I don't with snake spiders.
Once you do something like that, it means nothing to anybody else. You can't explain what being alone is. And I spent my life reflecting. What's it mean? What's it mean? As I'm married, had kid, Leah, it still stood there as a mentor, as a presence in my life. Still does.
It was searching for meaning,
right?
And you've got a turban in your head, a nice big full beard, and you are living your best life there. I think.
Yes, you are.
Maybe out of the cave or.
That's behind me is called the Kavari River, and it's right now. I don't know if you ever heard of Isha or that he has this thing of trying to save the Kavari. The rivers come down to be mostly dried out because the dam up above holds it back, and they're trying to restore they're trying to make all the trees and everything and restore the forest around the river. But it was this was a time when the river was full and riding along, so you can't see that today.
No, it's gone.
Even the temple in the back is gone. It's not there anymore. It's all changed.
That's a shame.
Goodness, it's terrible.
It's life changing. It changes. Everything changes. You're lucky you get your moments.
But is that progress?
Well, it depends. Progress is depends where you are in your cycle of time as you're looking at it. When you're looking beyond time, that's progress. It's just vibration. It's just presence.
Now, this particular site, which is, I'm not, can you pronounce this for me?
Hariom.com.
Okay, and that is HARIOM. HARIOM.com.
And on it, there's a list of all different saints and people who chanted and what they said about chanting and the value of chanting. And it also talks about the things I went through at the time of being in this room. So you go into the journals and you go down the list of all the journals are on the side.
Yes, lots to explore here. Lots to explore, lots to learn. I feel like, at least a large part of the reason we exist is to continue learning. Once you stop learning.
If I wasn't messed up as a teenager, if I wasn't the old young hippie traveler around going for whatever, if I leaving family, nothing works. If I wasn't angry then, I wouldn't have asked these questions. My life wouldn't have come this way. Now, 50 years later, I'm still reflecting and still growing on this course. But it certainly made it much more meaningful than it was when I was just going day to day. When you have nothing to lose, it doesn't matter, and you're just traveling around.
No, I understand that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly do. I think we both do, Kristen and I. Teenage years are tough. It's tough to wrap your head around what's going on around you and influx of hormones and the growing of the brain, because the brain grows through the entire teenage years.
Yeah, you're becoming your own authority as opposed to the parental ones that you grew up in.
Right. And then we become the parental authorities ourselves.
Yes.
With self-realization involved. It is a lot to take in.
It is.
So
if it weren't, it wouldn't be worthwhile.
I think everybody goes through something like that. Some people seem to be more adept at it than others, but I would not.
We go through every person goes through every experience, and if we blow one life and we mess it up, we come back and we fix it, and we come back and we get another run at it. We take it a different way, and this just goes. These cycles. One like changing clothes, we change bodies.
Mm-hmm. I think that harkens back to one of my earlier questions about reincarnation and do we have a purpose, some goal to solve in this existence.
I believe so. I believe the purpose in being here is to find that there's a God or that there's a spirit, and we have to find that as the inclusive, all-inclusive principle beyond all the things we do.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Life is certainly a journey.
In the meantime, we're busy. We got to build. We got a kid. We got to get a job. We got to get this. We have other little ventures to try and pull off, which is still a miracle in itself. Like even in relationships, it's a miracle. You can meet a person, you sit down together, you sleep together, you make love, and you're sharing everything. You're open to each other, and you're so trusting and completely. We don't talk to God like that, but we can talk like that to each other for a moment, and we expect it to be there, and it can't be there because it's in a physical realm that's changing too fast. It doesn't maintain. It has to grow. So there's a lot of maturity of growing up to seeing what am I attached to, what am I expecting, what's real, how do I change those, how do I evolve those, how do I let go of this or let go of that, why what? And you don't until you're ready.
Yep.
Yes, that is kind of the trouble with our existence, this fragment of consciousness or whatever it is that it is we're living out, is you're stuck and you're kind of born with this question of why am I here? It's the
problem is not in anyone else or in anything else around you. The problem is just you.
It's wrapping your own head around your own.
Because it's you have the solutions. In the question is the answer. In the puzzle, and the problem is the solution.
Right.
Amber Young says connected by love. Yeah, I think it is that unconditional love that binds us all. And
no conditions. Yeah.
That would be the materialist point of view, right? The species continues because we feel this unconditional love.
It's not like, I love you, where are you going? That's a condition.
Most definitely.
Yeah. And then it keeps it going.
Yeah.
But for what purpose, right?
Just for the hell of it.
Okay. For the hell of it.
Just for the hell of it.
You want to get to heaven? You got to raise a little hell.
Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, is it not?
Yeah.
We could do that like all day.
Sharon!
Ask that guy.
Ozzy
Osbourne, my childhood hero, by the way.
Hero.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I still love Ozzy music. Just to throw that out there for what it's worth, but I absolutely appreciate a Celestial Harp as well. So thank you,
that
sir.
Was amazing.
Well, I was an old folk musician, and I used to, before the hippie time, was more into folk music and things. So I had friends like Richie Havens and different people. So I was into a lot of really original music that was happening at that time. And I wasn't a singer. I grew up not being allowed to sing, and that. So it was, I identified to it. But it kind of was haunting, bugging me that I couldn't do anything about it. And probably that had something to do, both that and the teachers not letting me sing when I was in school, that I had to prove I could do something with music. And that's probably why the harp came through. So I have to be grateful for them and their influences, because it set seeds in me that I had to do something with it.
Oh, awesome. You're driven and inspired.
Absolutely.
And like I mentioned earlier, that nature of inspiration is kind of a mysterious thing. When energy flows through you,
after I did the 13 months of meditation, sure. I came out of the room and I wanted to come back, but I didn't come back. I ended up meeting certain saints and being in certain holy places in India. And then I went back into the room again for another 50 days. And in that 50 days, the minute I went back in the room, this gong went off, boom, and I couldn't sleep. I was wide awake. A vision was coming in. I couldn't disconnect and go to sleep. I couldn't lose consciousness for 50 days. I'd lie down, but my mind would keep going off and keep opening up, and I'm following it all. And I couldn't sleep. I was like, there was one point I was floating along on this river of inspiration. I got all this, just floating along on it, and I'm going along, and it's taking me back out of my silence into life. And like, wow! But there's the river of inspiration, but there's also the place where it came from. So the inspiration is like the hem of the robe of God. It's only the hem.
Consciousness is greater than our own.
It takes us to the edge of the temple of silence.
Tori Amos, another musician we appreciate and love, writes these extremely complex and beautiful songs. She says fairies write them all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who does? I look at this. I didn't do this. Something came through me, and this happened.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't let it go. Once the chance to do it, I couldn't say no. Okay, we'll get this. Okay, we'll do that. And then who knows what it took a number of years. Then I had to. Once I finished building it, and I realized, oh no, my work just begun. I got to learn how to play it. It took everything I did to just make it, and then I had to learn how to play it. So, yeah. We grow up, we're in a little puddle we grew up in. All of a sudden, we change the water, and suddenly we're in a pond, and this huge pond. We're this little tiny fish in this huge pond. And then we grow up a little more, and we get a little further, and suddenly we're in a lake, and that pond was nothing, and we're just a little fish in this big pond, or big lake. And then the lake becomes the ocean, and it just keeps going. Our world keeps going through these quantum jumps, quantum leaps.
Right.
Excellent. I want to talk about this website a bit. I believe this is a place where a person could reach out to you directly, Robin. Is that right?
Yeah, well, this is the iastro.com is the one where I put my monthly predictions on, just those little trivial hits for each sign for each month. But that and it has and yearly, some of my yearly predictions. That's just for that. But there's a link on that that can go to the iastro store, which is where you can contact me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for those that are listening, it is www.astro.com.
And if you want to get to the store, it's iastrostore.com.
Let's see if I can browse there.
Yeah.
I'm going to browse the store.
Browse the store, do a little shopping.
But, astrology, I never planned to be astrologer. It came in, it opened up my mind, it inspired me. It didn't make my life easier, it made it more meaningful. And boy, I'm so stubborn. If I didn't know the astrology in advance, I'd be stubborn. I'd refuse changes. Like when I was married, if I was taking the garbage out and the wife called and said, "Hey, honey, will you take the garbage out?" I would drop it on the spot. Of course, I don't have a marriage anymore. So but I'm stubborn. So astrology allowed me to realize, oh, this is coming to me. I better be ready for this. Even before I knew astrology, when I was in high school, to get through high school, I had to do my homework before the teacher told me, or I wouldn't do it. If she told me to do it, I wouldn't do it.
Wow.
So I had to do it beforehand, and then I started doing okay. But it took me some time to grow into, and some trouble growing into that.
Sounds like you are raging against the machine.
Oh,
if you won't do what you tell me.
There's so many different ways that we can be the I ego, the I body. Mm-hmm. Is one side of the universe. The I spirit, the I soul is the other side.
I love this.
There's these two eyes.
That's Kristen. Kristen is an Aries.
I am.
What do you see in store for Aries this year?
This is a good year for Aries. It's a lucky year for Aries. They've had their heavy tests over the last 5 or 10 years, and then just one hassle after another. And Jupiter goes into Aries in June. And it starts opening up to be one of the luckiest years. If you have new projects, you're going to write something, you're going to reach out and do something. It's a whole new understanding is coming, and you're on go.
Thank you. That's a plan of mine, of ours as well. So writing and things.
Yeah. It's why don't you? If you don't put it out, what are you going to do? You're going to wait another 12 years? No, it's your turn.
Right. It's 12 years. That's weird.
Why 12? Yeah. Interesting. I think
it's lucky for any move, any new business, any new extension. This is a lucky year for Aries, like that.
That's kind of a couple of goals you just said right there of mine. So that's wonderful. Thank you. It's
also easy for Aries to get pregnant this year.
Oh no, I'm all set with that, and so is he. I have 5 children. I'm good.
It's enough. Yeah.
We're both.
So that could mean a grandkid comes in or something comes in, like other things open up.
We're neutered like dogs.
We're neutered. We're fixed.
If we make anything, it's going to be really creepy. I'll tell you that. I'm not that sure you want to see that thing crawl out.
All right.
It'll be a defamation of nature itself.
Yes, it would.
How about Sagittarius? What do you see in line for Sagittarius?
Sag?
I am a Sag.
Okay, Sagittarius. have the puzzle of the universe right now. The ones who understand everything have a different face to everyone. They have different ways of looking at so many things. There's always another way to take, another way of looking at things. There's so many things going on, and you want to accept them all. But then you have all the misinformation. You have all the bad news and what sides, what's real, what's true, what's not true. You have a war, you have both sides putting out different pieces of information. This is a really confusing, dogmatic year for Sagittarians. It's hard to know what to choose. And it's easy to choose, oh, I did this, oh my goodness, it's not that, oh my goodness, it's not this. It's a confusing time. So the issue, then is for a few more years, but especially this year, is to be simple, keep it simple, no expectations. Easy to say.
Hey, you know what that means, right? Don't harp on me for anything. Harp, who is for anything that I'm going for here. Let's
just say if Kristen was going to start a business, she's just going to do it on impulse and she's going to make it happen. But if you tried to plan it and try to set it up, you do it too complicated. You make it too big and it'll get all tangled.
Greg Costas, I hope I don't get pregnant.
How about
you're good, Greg?
How about Scorpio? What do you see for Scorpio this year?
Well, for Scorpio, it's a difficult time. Like Uranus is going through Taurus. So Tauruses are getting more independent, but that's the independence of the war. We'll get more territory. We'll take this. The Scorpios are having to trust, and things are being disrupted. People are going things different ways that they want. They're not so stable, and it's hard to keep trusting. So there's a lot of changes going through, and they have to be ready to let go and go through changes and realize there's a purpose in this and not get caught in anger or jealousy.
Excellent. And for a more personalized reading, a person can go to the iastro.com website and reach out.
iAstroStore.com.
Okay. Yeah. iAstroStore.com.
The Astro.com to get you some of my predictions, but there's a link on there to go to get that to the store too. So,
what sort of information do you need from a person to do?
It's based on your time of birth, your place of birth, and your date of birth.
I noticed you said Uranus as opposed to Uranus.
Yes, thank you.
Here.
Yes, it's Uranus for the week of heart.
I grew up with Uranus.
It was the butt end of the solar system at the time it was discovered.
How is that button? Love it.
I suppose that is why they changed the name. And
they discovered Neptune, finding it exerted a pull on the gas and the gases of Uranus.
Exactly. There's a lot of giggling in the planetariums growing up.
Yeah.
For sure. If your school was fortunate enough to have a planetarium, I know that always created a little bit of banter. Pluto's always going to be a planet to me. I think it is now, right?
Yeah. Is it a rock this year, or is it a planet?
19 years ago or something.
I think astrology is going to be funny. In another 50 years, people are going to have 50 other planets, exoplanets to add into the chart. And they're going to have different concepts for all these planets. And they're going to put them in with all these big cycles. But really, the main planets that affect us the most are the ones you can see. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. You can see them. They have a direct effect. There are guiding lights. And the sun and the moon. And the 7 days are named after. So the outer planets, they have a presence. But Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, they're very powerful. But if you go and add the other ones, it's easy. You're almost going to have too many to choose to be able to make sense of a person. It's easy to talk about it, and it's so important. But really, the most important thing is to be happy in the day, to be shining, not hung up on the past, to be able to be here.
I have to imagine those kind of patterns and things are kind of a setup for looking at something kind of what comes to you, maybe in a psychic format about a particular person and individualized.
Yes, there's a lot of people. You look at a chart and you just grab what you can pick up, whatever you pick up on talking about. Really, that's not the best astrology. There's a system of working through it where you have to know there's a hierarchy of needs. You go through this, you take care of this, you take care of this, you see if this is where, you see if that's where, and you go through each level, and you have to look at the timings of when they're affected. And it's like you can listen to a piece of music and say, oh, that's really cool. But if you see this written music out, it means nothing unless you're going through, thinking it through and thinking each piece and hearing it. And you have to go through it. So you have to build up the symphony. So when I do a chart, I'm like the conductor that's reading the symphony. The person's the dancer. They're going to dance their own way. But I can tune into the symphony and into the dance. And sometimes I can help if the dance is going to turn difficult, or they're going to put a tango on after a waltz. You might fake it for 30 seconds, but if it's going to go on for 10 minutes, you're going to probably get off the floor if you don't know how to tango. So like knowing these changes in our life when they come up, when vulnerabilities come up, they're going to come up. You can't get through a few years without something big, significant coming up, but it's how you navigate through them for your best interest or your worst interest that becomes important. What's better for you than not?
It's true.
Ultimately, it is about your experience and the experience of those around you.
Mm-hmm.
Unconditional love is the glue that keeps us all together.
Yeah, but I mean, you could be running a business, and it could be getting into real trouble. And do you just trust to keep going on it, or do you write it off and just start new? And sometimes one is more valuable than the other.
We wholeheartedly agree. This has been a wonderful interview.
Yes,
I recommend that all our listeners, watchers, viewers out there look for a reading. Get out to iastrostore.com. Go see Robin Armstrong. Even a simple Google, like I initially done when we first talked, it gives us a wealth of information.
I do have a school of astrology, which is the rasa.ws, and there's a whole school of astrology you can find out about if you're interested.
And what does RASA, R-A-S-A, stand for?
Robin Armstrong School of Astrology.
Of course.
Of course it does.
But actually it's just a coincidence because it actually means devotion and prayer in India, in Hindi.
I played that because I should have figured that out. I apologize.
No, that's good.
This has been a great time. I've enjoyed.
Clark said, "Thanks, guys."
Lots of people.
So how many rabbits do you have in your yard?
Oh, how many?
How many what?
Rabbits do you have in your yard?
Rabbits. Oh, that's funny.
Well, our name
Just
deviates from a thing about rabbits. And Kristen and I were staying actually not in the house we're in now, but we were at my previous residence, and we had a family of rabbits that lived in a hedge that divided the yards. And there was some rather unusual paranormal phenomena.
There was a UFO,
including us looking at at least an unidentified to us flying object streaking across the sky, as we always say, faster than a jet, but slower than a meteor or a shooting star. And we were both looking at it, and I just thought, geez, next thing we know, we're going to see Bigfoot chasing the bunnies.
The bunnies.
We used to feed them fruit and stuff, and it was a whole.
Okay.
Yeah, what happened was we were looking for a show name. We had got asked to do a show, and I said, I was just goofing around. I said, how about Bigfoot and the Bunny? And he's like, that's so cool. And I was like, no, I was just kidding. And the next thing you know, we're Bigfoot and the Bunny.
So I was assuming it was something more intimate between the relationship between the two of you, but then I'm glad I asked.
Are you saying we do something like bunnies? Well, that's true as well.
Wow, he is like yours. Holy crap!
And why are you
so well
saying we don't?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be on your show.
This has been a blast.
Was great. Thank you so much.
And stick around. We'll talk to you in a moment.
Yes,
we'll just wrap things up. Thank you.
Okay.
And that's all the time we have for Bigfoot and the Bunny. Yeah, like a bunny.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, Ken,
thank you.
Ken, you're not the only one that makes me blush. Apparently, Robin does too.
We'll see you guys next Thursday on a Dark Horse Paranormal podcast. We want to thank each and every one of you that listened and joined our chat tonight. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We want to thank the Paranormal United Network for sharing out our show and helping us along tonight. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Courtney.
Awesome, true paranormal unity right there. And Howard, everybody. And Greg Cost. Hey, great show. Thank you. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you Thursday. Have a great week. Stay safe. Avoid those CMEs. I don't know. Did they give you sunburn? I'm not even sure. Hopefully things keep working as usual.
Okay.
We'll see you next Thursday. Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.